about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Start Poorly, no other than Mr. Justin Grifford. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Justin, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely, Daniel. Absolutely. So, my name is Justin Grifford, and I am a husband of about 16 years and father. I've got three kids, and I am a full time pastor. I've pastored in different churches probably the last 16 years or so, and I am the author of Start Poorly.
Mr. Justin Grifford. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, what is the main premise of Start Poorly?
I have been one day. I think once I became a father, I realized how much free time I no longer had, and if I was going to be a great husband, a great father, a great pastor and leader, I knew that I needed to establish habits in my life. And so, for the last 12 years or so, habits have been a big part of my life. And so, if anyone that's like that, the end of one year and the beginning of the next is a really big deal because you can see how well you did with your goals from one year and you can launch into your new goals going into the next. And so starting 2024, I had those goals. I had miles I wanted to run. I had books I wanted to read. I ultimately wanted to start practice writing, lots of different things. And so on January 1st, I was hit with the flu. I was hit with COVID. I pulled my hamstring. I got an infection. There's so many things that just halted any of the goals that I had going into 2024. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed watching my kids play outside. And I told myself, man, I am really starting this year very poorly. And as those words came out of my mouth, I thought, there's so many things in life. Almost everything that we do in life we start poorly, whether it's tying our shoes, whether it's learning to potty train, whether it's learning algebra. We all start it very poorly, and over time we get better. But when it comes to the goals, the dreams that we have, the habits we want to develop, we feel like we have to do them perfectly. We feel like they have to that everything has to be in place, that we have to have the perfect plan. And so for me, start poorly became a soundtrack of grace that whatever I want to do, whatever I want to start, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to have all of the answers up front, but I can just start and learn as I go and be able to give myself grace.
Very well said, Mr. Justin. Very well said. So, how did you define starting poorly, and why is it a crucial first step forward achieving goals?
So I define starting poorly is we all have something that we've always wanted to do. We look around and we see people achieving the things, doing the things that they have always wanted to do, and maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you see people who run marathons, you have no interest in that. You see people go mountain climbing, you see people go on diets, and you don't necessarily want to do those things, but there are things that you want to do. But for whatever reason, there's this thing inside of us that makes us want to be perfectionists. That makes us again think that we want to have the perfect plan. And so starting poorly is basically making the decision that you will take the first step. Starting poorly is making that decision within yourself to say, I don't have to have all the answers, but I want to take a very small baby step to begin to pursue this thing that I've always wanted to pursue.
So, Mr. Justin, can you describe the psychological barriers that prevent people from taking the initial imperfect step?
So I would say in the book I talk about the fear court, and I don't know if you how familiar you are with malls, big shopping centers. They We're kind of moving away from them now, but there used to be a lot of restaurants packed in together that they called food courts. And in the book, I talk about the fear court, and that there's lots of different types of fear. There is a fear that if we finish our goal, if we're writing a book, there's a fear that no one will like it. There's a fear that we can go to that tells us that everything has to be perfect. There's a fear that no one will like it. There's a fear that that it's already been done and people will look down. There's so many different kinds of fears, and so fear is one of those barriers that manifests itself in so many different ways throughout the process. Are we good enough? Do we have what it takes? Fear is probably that dominant psychological barrier that you'll find yourself in so many different places.
So, in what ways does striving for perfection hinder progress, or according to your book?
So what I would say is there's a great metaphor in the book that if you're familiar with lion tamers, you've seen some of these old depictions of in a circus act. There is a man in the arena with a lion, and he has a whip, and he has a stool that has three or four legs on it. And you would think that the greatest tool that that man could have in the arena with the lion is the whip, but instead it is the stool. And the reason the stool is so important is because the lion cannot focus on all three of those legs of the stool at the same time. And so the lion is actually paralyzed in place because he cannot focus on those things. And so when you try to put together the perfect plan, when you try to put together the perfect diet, when you try to put together the perfect regimen of how to play the guitar, you become paralyzed and you get locked up and you can't move, and you either quit altogether or you procrastinate because you can't focus on one single direction, and instead your attention is scattered.
So, how do you propose, or how did you propose overcoming the fear of failure?
So one of there's a lot of different ways I think that you can look at that. I think whenever you begin to look at stories, whenever you begin to hear people's stories about how they began, there's a lot of celebrities, there's a lot of actors, there's a lot of musicians that started their careers very poorly. There are authors who started their careers very poorly, and even some of the greatest stories that we have ever read, some fictional, some non-fictional. I think when we're able to kind of pull back and read some of the testimonies of those who are the most talented among us, when we see their poor starts or their humble starts, I think everyone has to realize that everyone comes from somewhere, and everyone had incredible humble beginnings at some point.
Certainly. So, are there any real life examples or case studies in the book that illustrate the benefits of starting imperfectly?
Yes, I have a friend named Jimmy, and Jimmy in his younger days was an athlete, very active, very driven. And one day he woke up and saw that he was overweight, that he was out of shape, that life was kind of moving on without him. And he went on a hike with a friend and was was huffing and puffing, barely could keep up with him. And his friend made the comment to him that, "Wow, this is not the Jimmy that I used to know." And it hurt his feelings, and he took that to heart. And so he set out to go from couch. He wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. That had always been a dream of his, is to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And so he decided that, okay, if I'm going to do Kilimanjaro, I have to at least run a marathon. And if I have to run a marathon, I need to at least do a half marathon. If I need to do a half marathon, I need to at least do a 5K. And so he started his training program and put a 5K on the schedule. In 3 months, I'm going to run a 5K. And he told me, he talked to me about that first run was more of a walk and almost a crawl than it was an actual run. And so over time, he started poorly and he did just enough to keep himself from getting injured. And so a year after him making that first step, he was able to make it to the summit of Kilimanjaro. And I talk about this story in the book, and had a long conversation with him about what starting poorly looked like for him.
Inspiring, Mr. Justin. Truly inspiring. So, what practical strategies does the book offer for sidestepping and perfectionism?
So I broke the book down in three categories. I proposed the problem that we all have, the solution, which is starting poorly, and then I have five practical steps. And I identify that every goal, every habit, every dream, it finds itself in one of five phases. And so I talk about those five phases in the book. Every phase has a pro, every phase has a con, every phase has a box jump or a hurdle to overcome. And so the first phase is the dream phase. Every dream, every goal starts in the dream phase. It's uh, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a baseball player. We all have a big dream, a small dream, and we spend a lot of time thinking about that. Some of us spend our entire lives in the dream phase, thinking what it would be like to do that one thing. And so, beyond the dream phase, the next phase is the plan phase. The plan phase is where you take that dream and you say, okay, I want to do something about this. I want to put something on paper. I want to write out and dedicate time to this thing. And so that's the plan phase. And the hurdle for the plan phase, again, it's in the title of the book, is that sometimes we can get stuck in the plan phase because we're perfectionists. We want the perfect plan. We won't leave the plan phase until we get the perfect plan. And the perfect plan doesn't exist, because if you do have the perfect plan, once you begin the start phase, you'll find that you have to change it. And so the third phase is the start phase. And in the start phase, that's when you do it. That's the day that you circle on the calendar. That's when you begin pursuing that goal. And the start phase, the beauty of it is you're finally there. But the con and the scary thing is you may find out very quickly that you may or may not have what it takes. And so the start phase leads you into the grind phase. And the grind phase is that long trip across the desert. The grind phase is where it's not as fun as it used to be, that it's a lot of work. You're not as creative as you thought you would be, or as you thought you were at the beginning. And so the grind phase is where you really have to show your mettle, and that the grind phase is what develops you. And so that brings you to the final phase, and that would be the finish phase. And in the finish phase, the beauty of that is obviously you're done. If your goal was to run a marathon, you've run the marathon. If your goal was to write a book, you've written a book. If it's a habit you want to develop, you truly never finish that, but it might be established as a habit for you. It kind of depends how you define that. But even in our finishing, there's some hurdles that we have to overcome, because some people are incredibly afraid to what Seth Godin calls shipping your work, that they're fearful of what the world may think of what they do. They're fearful of, if I run the marathon, is it all over now? Do I have another goal to go to? Because sometimes their goal can become this companion and this pet, and if they've achieved it, they have almost lost it. So those are the five phases that we lead and go through in the book.
Certainly. So, are there any circumstances that when you're writing the book, you procrastinate?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As I because one of the things that I wanted to do, one of the goals I had for 2024 was to develop writing. And there were plenty of days that I was working on the book, and so many days that I would just hit this wall where I had nothing going for me, that I had um, nothing creative to think of. But what I found, what was helpful for me, is I had to reestablish what counted as working on the book. I made myself try to work on it for about an hour a day. And in the book, I even talk about this: as you're working towards your goal, it's important to create a menu. Like when you go to a restaurant, you have a menu, you have different options on that menu. Maybe you get the same thing every time, maybe you like to mix it up. But when we work on our goal, it's important that we can create a menu to choose what counts. So if I'm writing a book, maybe putting words down on paper doesn't count every single time. maybe listening to podcasts, maybe listening to interviews. Doing a multitude of things can count towards your goal. And so I found as I begin to procrastinate, I would need to change my strategy and choose something different on my menu.
So, Mr. Justin, what will be your advice for those people out there to motivate themselves and share their talents to the world?
I would tell you that since writing and having different people read it, so many people have come at it from different directions. People who coaches, baseball coaches, who see this as the perfect sports psychology book. There have been people who have started blogs. There are people who have started diets, who have started workouts. Architecture students who have told me that their professors have taught them to start with a bad first draft. I would say that everyone has something inside of them that they have always wanted to do, that they have always wanted to start, and that anyone can start poorly. It doesn't take a professional, it doesn't take a genius, but anyone can start poorly and make that first step or that first stumble in the direction of their goal.
Definitely. Is there a follow up for this book?
Is there a follow up? I'm currently putting together and plan to start a newsletter very soon. You can go to justingrifford.com to get any of that info. And in time, maybe there will be a finish strong counterpart to the start poorly, but that is not in production as of yet.
Yes. Can we do start richly in
That's
reverse?
right. That's
So
right.
thank you
That's
for
right.
thank you for your advice, Mr. Justin. And so, what are your short term and long term goals in writing?
So I would love to take start poorly and be able to talk to audiences about it. I would love to continue to speak to podcasts, because what's been the most rewarding for me are hearing people's start poorly stories, and so I would love to just get to continue to hear those and get to be able to speak to audiences and see people walk in the dreams and the goals and the habits that they've always wanted to pursue.
So, Mr. Justin, good luck to your goals. And what are the
Thank you.
some common misconceptions about success that the book aims to debunk?
That's a great question. I would say I think one of the myths that we have when common people, just everyday people, look at the most successful, they sum it up to talent. They believe that it has everything to do with talent. That it believes that some are born with talent, some are given talent by God, and there are the haves and the have-nots. Those who are successful because they have that talent, and those who are not successful because they don't have that talent. What I've come to find out is that there are many people who are normal, everyday people who work hard, and they develop habits of dedicating time to their craft, dedicating time to these dreams, to these goals that they've always had. And so if you want to become the man that you've always wanted to be, if you want to become that you will take habits and it will take stewardship of your time to become that person.
Certainly. Totally agree, Mr. Justin. And what mindset shift does the book suggest for overcoming a perfectionist approach to goals?
The book will tell you that you need to be able to learn from your failures, that you need to own that you will fail. You need to own that you will do a bad job, that you will have a bad first draft, that you won't be able to play the guitar chords the way that you thought you would. That when you go for that first run, you'll probably walk more than you'll run. Just acknowledging within yourself that this is going to start ugly, that when you wake up to do it the next day, that you may not want to, that your passion may not be there, but doing something is better than nothing. Doing 5 minutes a day is better than you trying to do an hour a day and then get burnt out and pick it up again 2 weeks later. So taking those small baby steps is still progress.
Certainly, people don't afraid to commit mistake as well as failure because successful people learn from their failures in life. That's why they become
Right on.
successful. So, Mr. Justin, does the book offer any insight on how to maintain momentum after starting poorly, I
What I
should say?
found that Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of things. So there's a game that I play with my kids called Shoots and Ladders, and the game, there's 100 numbered squares from 1 to 100. The idea is to get to the 100th square, and then all throughout the game there are ladders that if you land on the bottom, it takes you to the top. And if they're in the game, there are chutes that if you land at the top of the chute or at the slide, it takes you back down. And so the idea is that you can get caught in this endless cycle of ladder, up a ladder, down a chute, up a ladder, down a chute. And life is a lot like a game of chutes and ladders, but so is working towards your goal. But what I've found every game that I've played with my kid, every time that we've sit down to play this game, as long as I keep hitting the spinner, even if I land on one, if I keep hitting the spinner, I will reach the top. And so the encouragement in that is not to give up, because you will experience ups, you will experience downs, you will have days that feel amazing, you will have days where you feel like you're losing progress. But if you keep hitting the spinner, you will reach the top and you will reach the finish line.
Yes, indeed. People try until you succeed. So, Mr. Justin, how did you discuss about the importance of a small incremental progress?
Small incremental progression. So one of the big things about Jimmy's story, mentioning him in the book, is that every run that he went on, he said that he did just enough to not get injured, because he knew if he got injured, then he would be off his feet for several days. And so he did just enough to keep himself healthy for the next day. And so I think we have to realize that there are many days that we are going to wake up and feel great. And I talk about this in the book. There's an Olympic trainer. I think it's called Adias Abba. I forget the pronunciation of their name, but this is an Olympic trainer, and they talk about the rule of thirds. Is that a Olympian, uh, a world class athlete, they will have days when they train that they feel amazing, that they feel great, that they feel like they would win gold. They have days where they train that they feel okay, that they feel average, and they have days where they train where they feel awful. They feel terrible, they feel like they're not making any progress. And so when you can dedicate yourself to knowing that you'll feel different on each day, when you know that there's going to be an ebb and flow to it, you can begin to make those small steps and realize, okay, I'm going to put so much time into it today. And if it doesn't go well, I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. And if I give it a little bit of time each day, over time, I'm going to begin to see progress, because not every day is going to be down here, but also not every day is going to be up here.
Yes, for sure. So, what mindset shift does the book suggest for overcoming well, belittling yourself, to be proud of
Belittling yourself.
yourself?
Hmm. I would say
Sometimes,
that the, go ahead.
sometimes we have a self pity.
Hmm. Hmm.
And how
Yeah,
did
I
you
think,
discuss it?
how do you overcome that self pity? Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great question. I think whenever you, going back to some of the stories and the struggles that others have had, and just researching some of those and realizing that that not everybody has those moments that go so great. Not everybody has just these glowing experiences. And this is what the grind phase is about. Is talking about the different phases. As you get into that grind phase, you definitely experience some of those things. And some of the tips that I give about the grind phase is we have to do something that I call create a loop. There's something that advertisers do that they know how to draw people in. Whenever I was a kid, I watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know if you know about the Ninja Turtles or not, but there was the cartoon show, there was the movies, there was the toys, and so it constantly created this loop where I was always into the Ninja Turtles. And so when it comes to our goal, we have to create a loop for ourselves. And so in my case, in working on writing this book, I had to surround myself with people and with voices that spoke into writing creatively, people who spoke about setting goals, people who had uh, wrote blogs about what goals looked like and how to overcome obstacles and overcome these things. And so, whatever it is that you're working on, to I think to keep you from belittling yourself, is you have to create this loop of influences and create this loop of voices that when you can't speak into your life and when you can't speak to how down you are, some of them can. And whenever you can hear those voices of people that you admire, that can really do an amazing thing to pick you up off the floor.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Justin. So before
Thank
we
you.
wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Music 101, and it's third season, people. Third season with the Mix Myth. Music 101 is created to empower music itself, and legendary icon in the music industry. So please do listen, Music 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Justin, how can readers use the lessons from the book to approach long term ambitious goals differently?
So I think when you can use the book to identify one goal, one dream that you've always wanted to achieve, if you follow the process to the end and you find yourself at the finish line, I think you can use the book to pursue the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And it can start to be a routine. It could start to be a catalyst for you that you, knowing all of these phases, knowing all of the hurdles that comes with it, you can begin to achieve and do all the things that you've ever wanted to do.
Mr. Justin Grifford, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And we are looking forward for more and more and more empowering books like this. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Absolutely. You can go to my name, justingrifford.com, and find my book there. You can also find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and where all of the books are sold. It's available in ebook, hardcover or hard copy, and you can get it an ebook on Audible or an audiobook on Audible.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Justin Grifford, because if you support him, more and more and more inspiring and empowering books to come. So, Mr. Justin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
Modicon
Daniel.
people, Modicon people, see you soon. So, Mr.